Hello everyone and welcome to Helix Cloud Games. My name is Richie and joining me this week is the host of Talking the PS, outside of Chris 2077, Mr. Chris.
Hello everyone.
And our Cater Neutral One, Mr. Rob.
I don't have anything clever to say like Chris did then. So
Did anyone even pick up on me saying it last week?
I did.
Not last week, no, I picked it up this week.
What I didn't pick up is until the edit is how many times Rob did this. We made like the Wakanda sign.
It's not the Wakanda word. We're reusing that.
He does that anyway. If you not noticed when we sat down the pub, like every 5 minutes, he just goes. It's just like a nervous twitch he has now. It's just what he does.
Well, yeah, I know he does it in the pub, but I didn't think it.
That's just so
anyway.
people know what's up.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
If things go down.
It's a thing. I appreciate it. Well, I didn't see you doing it during the show. Just Wakanda forever.
It does come out next week.
It does. We're going to go see it. But we've got a great show for you lined up this week where we'll be discussing Kojima's new project leaked, Xbox losing money on every single console, and new games coming to Game Pass for this November. Before we get into it, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, or you're on your podcast feed of choice with notifications switched on to keep you in the loop of all of our great content here at Helix Cloud Games, such as Talking the PS, where every single week we break down the PlayStation side of cloud gaming in the clouds, our weekly cloud gaming discussion show, CloudQuest, which drops every single Friday on YouTube and podcast feeds. And our live streams were last week. Rob chucked a chicken at me in Chivalry 2.
I did indeed.
He did. It was quite fun. It's just the way you went about it as well. It's like it wasn't like you just randomly chucked a chicken at me. You summoned me over.
Yeah, I'd been carrying that chicken around for a while, just for you.
Well, I would actually thank a few people before we get into the show properly this week. Because first of all, Code Z for making all the music for our awesome intro. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I remember when Chris showed me it, the first time, I was like, "That's awesome. We need that. We need it." And everyone who tuned in last week for our first ever show, thank you very much. But, gentlemen, what have we been playing this week?
Rob, you can go first.
Shall I go first? Okay. Obviously, I've been playing more Chivalry 2, which I know is your favourite game.
I have not been playing more Chivalry 2. I can swear to that.
Yeah. But I've been playing a lot of Chivalry 2. I'm still terrible at it. And the spell of Civ 6 has dropped off now. So I've had a little bit of time to play the Shadow of War. I went back on Game Pass to play Shadow of War a little bit. Nice. I think it's just because I got too involved in Lord of the Rings, like with Rings of Power, and then I rewatched the movies, and I just wanted a bit more Middle Earth in my life.
You watch the movies and it's like, it's just not enough, I need more.
Yeah, more.
Door. Shadow of War is so good as well. Like, I actually prefer Celebrimbor from the game than I do the TV show.
I haven't played Shadow of War. I've completed Shadow of Mordor.
It's on Game Pass, Richie.
I know, but you bounce around games a lot more than me, Rob. I've noticed that.
Yeah, it's like an ADHD thing, probably.
I try to stick with a game until I'm done with it before I move on to the next thing. I might have a few.
I have a very bad problem. If I get too into a game, it just takes over my life, and because I'm self-employed, that can have devastating consequences because there's no one telling me to stop playing from me.
You mean Sean Bean doesn't pop up and warn you you've been playing for too long? Get a life.
If you don't walk into the office at 9 o'clock, no one's there to shout at you.
Yeah.
You're the person who needs to do the shouting when other people do it.
If I turn up at 12, who's going to say anything? Nobody. That's who.
Yeah.
So that is the risk. But yeah, the joys of Game Pass. This week, after Chivalry 2 we played on Thursday, go check out our live stream. We played with you, the wonderful community. I played a little bit of Tunic on Game Pass because it's one of the kind of Game of the Year contenders. I think it was out in like early March time, and it's one of those I think it was like, it's got loads of Zelda vibes to it, but it's got a cute little fox in an asymmetric kind of world, and it's fun. I've only played about an hour or so. Fun what I've played so far. He's just so cute. And I wrapped up on Plague Tale Requiem as well. Fully completed, platinum. Done with that. So now I'm in that period where it's like 4 days until God of War comes out, which obviously we'll discuss tomorrow on Talking to PS, but I'm hyped now. I'm actually tempted to jump into God of War 2018, but I know I won't have time to finish it. But just like get the feel for that world again as like a teaser for Wednesday. I think it comes out. So super hyped for that. If you
give Plague Tale like a score of 10, what would you give it?
Ooh, 9, I'd say.
Nice,
really,
impressive.
really good. Like it's just right up my street. It ticks all those boxes that I've said. Like if you've got Game Pass, check it out. Again, I think I've said on many shows, like play the first one beforehand, but just character, story, musical score, even going back for some of the kind of achievement mop-up and playing through the campaign again, just like finishing certain chapters off. Just kind of drove home my thought process of, this is just really well polished. For like the budget of the game, the size, the scope of the game, absolutely knocked it out of the park. And it's definitely in my game of the year run, I think, as well.
It's quite linear, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. See, it's got like a little mini open world section similar to like Uncharted 4 had when you hit Madagascar, and it gives you like a bit more exploration, but then it very much brings you right back to linear story. And it's all chapter based, so it's like, again, if you're kind of like me, you only get certain pockets to game in, it's quite good. You can play 2 a chapter, then go, right, I'm done for the night, and it ends on quite a good like chaptered beat, I guess, every time.
Yeah, I think I prefer that style of game than big open worlds all the time, because big open worlds, they can be fun to lose yourself in, but I always find like I spend a lot of time doing nothing.
Yeah, you get a bit lost.
Yeah.
In it. Well, this is quite particular. It's got quite a linear progression tree as well of kind of, if you do more stealth approach to the areas, you get more stealth points added to your skill tree. So you don't pick them, you just gain them by doing it like areas a certain way. If you kind of go all out aggressive, you get more aggressive things, like you can hold more crossbow bolts or something. And then if you use your alchemy sets, like your fire explosions and your powder bombs and stuff, you get like, you can craft more with less resources. So it's kind of rewards you for playing in your specific play style, which I quite appreciated. Bit of a pain for one of the achievements for that one, but all in all, highly recommend it.
I feel like Plague Tale is going to end up on the list, on my list, next to like Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Shadow of Mordor, where it's just like these games that I do definitely want to play at some point, but I never find the right window to sit down and play them.
You usually get a good little Christmas window though when you're off work, and I don't think there's any after God of War, which you probably finish by Christmas. You might have a little pocket of time there.
Possibly, yeah. I could maybe knock off one of them, but it's probably not going to be Plague Tale purely just because I need to play the first one first, and I don't currently have access to it, so I'd have to buy it. So if I like that Christmas period, it depends. We'll see what I'm like after God of War. I've not been playing much interesting, to be honest. It's just been mainly FIFA and chipping away towards the Platinum and Trails of Cold Steel. Just again, I'm just waiting for God of War at the moment.
Yeah, waiting for Ragnarok.
Yeah, waiting for Ragnarok. But Chris, would you like to introduce us to I
certainly would. The excellently exuberant, excavated Xbox expose, aka the news.
The news. So we'll start things off by talking about Microsoft losing money on every single Xbox.
Xbox.
We kind of already knew this, though. This is the thing. It's only just come out, but like I thought this was like kind of common knowledge that like most platforms that do lose, like the console itself is usually a loss leader, but they make the money back on the services and the games.
Yeah, that's kind of how the industry's been for quite some time. I think this week, or this past week and a half with Phil Spencer, I feel like he's kept everything close to his chest for so long now. And then he's done this conference at the Wall Street Journal, and he's done a couple of podcasts. He's basically been on tour. It's Phil on tour this past week, and he's just kind of all those cards close to his chest. He's just dishing them out freely now because there's so many news articles dropped this past week of just he said this is updated. We've got news on this, and I think most of our stories in this week's show derive from just Phil Spencer chatting to somebody, whether it's a journalist or a talk show host. And I think it was just kind of a surprise that it's $200 loss. I think the PS5, PlayStation announced about this time last year that they'd kind of hit that tipping point where they're no longer making a loss on the consoles, because there is a point obviously when parts and resources and production line become so streamlined that they become profitable, or they kind of hit that break-even mark, and that usually happens a year or so into the cycle. But $200 on each kind of seems high, but that's the business that we're in, right? We're in, like we make them ourselves. They are in.
Yeah.
Like, the steepness surprised me more than the fact that, like, it's kind of common knowledge amongst anyone who cares that, like, these consoles lose money. I mean, it kind of just, like, gives credence to the argument that getting away from hardware is the future, right? Like,
an inevitability.
If you can build the kind of, like, the ecosystem without having to take a massive loss on each console sale, then surely that works for the company. It works for kind of us not having to buy them and stuff like that. So yeah, like, I would happily not have a console and save Microsoft £200.
I'm guessing they've done like the cost benefit analysis and realised by trying to maintain the price of like previous generations or close to for this generation of consoles, and they take probably a bigger loss. They're probably taking a bigger loss on the Series X and S than they did on the Xbox One generation. But it ensures that people are able to buy them, especially during like a chip shortage, and like things are quite tight for a lot of people at the moment. So you still want to get Xboxes in people's hands. So by taking a bigger loss on the console itself, it means you're going to get more people into that ecosystem, get more people in Game Pass, more people buying games, and so on and so forth. So you make up your money later.
Yeah, and I think Microsoft had to do that, didn't they? Like, from the position compared to the last generation, they had to, like, build their ecosystem back up in a quite significant way.
Yeah. Well, we saw it, didn't we, with the PS4 and the Xbox One launches? Because the Xbox One had that pack-in camera, the initial price was so much higher than the PlayStation 4, even though it was a little bit more... Was it more powerful, the Xbox One, I think, marginally? Or there was the PS4?
It was, but it's kind of but most AAA third-party games are going to run just as well on either of them. It's that extra bit of power is not that tangible, to be honest.
It was such a fine line that everyone flocked towards the PS4 because of just the cheaper price point, and then they didn't want the pack-in camera necessarily, which they inevitably ditched the pack-in camera, but the kind of damage was already done at that point. But as a business, yes, it makes sense that you have to invest, and it's a long-term game, isn't it? They're hoping to cut the costs, eat some of the price for consumers, so that inevitably, as you said, Richie, you've got millions more of them in the wild, which if you make, I don't know, $30 over every piece of software sold, then it's pure profit at that point when it's a digital code, because as we said, digital sales and such. And you've got to imagine all the peripherals. Like the controller hasn't really evolved that much this iteration for Xbox. Like it's not got any DualSense features. So year on year, they're not doing anything that different from the original model. So it does make you wonder though, because like we've said on episode 1 last week, just the sheer value of those all access passes. Like I'm paying less than £21 a month for a console, a controller, and 2 years of Game Pass, which means I'm spending virtually no more money on Xbox, I would have thought, for the next 2 years, because I just play the Game Pass games.
It's good for me. It's literally going to be the odd one-off game. Like I bought FIFA on Xbox. Because that's a game that's not going to come to Game Pass, or at least not till next year when it's basically redundant.
Like next week, they're like FIFA 23 on Game Pass.
I mean, if that happens, it happens. You take your risk with this stuff sometimes.
Yeah, of course.
I don't think I'd regret buying it because I technically bought it 3 times. So, like, I will not buy it a 4th time.
How much is that on Xbox, by the way?
It was a bit over £60, I think it was.
So that's like straight away. That's like £20 at Microsoft. I assume you go up to the store.
Yeah. Because it's Xbox Series S is digital only, so you have to.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry.
The biggest downside of the S, to be honest.
I'd love it, Richie. I know you would never do that, but if you forgot for a brief moment that it didn't have a disc drive, because I feel like that will happen to many people out there who get them for Christmas and stuff. And you returned your PS5 copy of FIFA, you ordered an Xbox copy, then that arrived and you went to place it in and went, oh shit. And then you had to return that copy again to then buy it digitally. Would have just been hilarious.
How many people have went to a game shop, whatever your local game shop is called, to bought a Series S for Christmas, for the grandkids, for the kids, for the nephews, whatever, and picked up some games that they think they'll like at the same time, and the guy on the till, just jaded as hell, doesn't give a damn, doesn't realise that the Series S doesn't have a disc drive, and they put it down the box with the console and the games and just process the sale. And little Timmy wakes up on Christmas Day morning to all these discs that he can't use. How many
sure
people do you think will happen?
I'd like to hope all of these employees are trained with that bare minimum of expectation. Like when you get at the till point, just double check what they're selling. However, little Timmy will probably have 2 years of Game Pass, so he won't be too upset because he's got every AAA title to play and everything else included. But
we've all worked retail, and like you have days when you're just not paying attention, you're just zombieing it.
That's true. Back to the console cost, though. I am intrigued to wonder if this is a higher cost for Microsoft because they have two variants, the S and X. Mm-hmm. Like, is there more? Obviously, they probably share some components, but at the same time, they're very different devices. Yeah. And I do wonder if that just kind of has everything been doubled, but because it's got the PlayStation literally have. I guess they have the disc and discless version, but it's not quite the same as the power difference internally.
Like, regardless, you still need two production lines going, no matter how much similarity there is, right?
Yeah,
different boxes, different. Yeah,
it's everything. Yeah, it's everything imprinted differently.
With the PlayStation, they probably share about 70% of the same production line. There'll be a fork where things go. Okay, this is going to be a disc version. This is going to be a discless version. Disc version gets your disc on, but gets like assembled into its case. Then the other one just gets assembled into its case. I'd imagine in their like manufacturing process, the disc drive going in to the PlayStation is the last thing, just so they can have that consistency before the split.
Yeah.
Where with the Series S and X, it's probably going to be very different right from the beginning because the form factor is massively different.
Yeah.
So immediately you're probably starting off with a different motherboard right from the get-go.
Yeah. It's with even like the cooling and everything. It's just laid out differently, isn't it?
Yeah. The PlayStation production line needs to be just so incredibly massive because of how stupidly big that console is. I know I keep coming back to it every single time I get a book, but like the sheer space you need for a production line for that stupid shell.
I think
I hate the PlayStation.
There'll be a slim model out next year. Don't worry about it.
The Series X is quite big as well, but I think it's smaller than the PlayStation. But
yeah, it is.
I mean, it's a black cube.
Yeah, it's a sensible shape. That's the key.
The Series S just basically looks like a last generation console. To be perfectly honest, like it's about the same size.
It's just been boxes, you know. Like I don't know about. I know when they announced them, there's this big reveal on them all, but it's like. It just goes under my there is something nice about the box. I did like the PS4 design. I thought that was quite clever with like the slats stacked on top. And the PS4 Pro was like, we'll just add another stack. I'm surprised the PS5 wasn't just another stack again. Yeah, there's 5 stacks now. That's why it's the PS5.
Yeah, they made some decisions like for cooling. I think it needs to be that big for cooling, but then they over designed it. I kind of agree. Where Xbox went, you know what? You're just having a box. It's just a box.
It's by name, box by name, box by nature. But yeah, even down to the little things, like the Series S comes with, of course, the white controller, which we all know, and then the X comes with the black. And it's like, it's something really minimal, but then that is, again, at 2 points, they'll have to get the different chassis for the controllers, which is another duplication where PlayStation doesn't have that cost because everything's white at launch. If you're on the VR, it's white. If you're on the controller, it's white. If you want the charging dock, it's white. It's like, just get it out there. So there is something to be said, but eventually they will start to turn profit, no doubt, and we'll probably see another entry in the Series S, and we'll see the PlayStation 5 Pro at some point, and they'll get it down. But in the meantime, like it's working for them because, as we covered on last week's show, Richie, they're selling millions of them, and more importantly, to new players who've never been in the ecosystem before. So it'll come good eventually.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked briefly about one of the problems of last generation with Microsoft being like the Kinect. It was ultimately, in hindsight, stupid decision. I think Microsoft accept that. I think the other biggest problem for like the last generation of Xbox was just the games. Outside the first party lineup, didn't come really close to PlayStation.
No,
that's fair. Yeah,
and while next year is looking like Phil Spencer is basically straight up saying next year is going to be better. This been a bit of a quiet year this year for games, Microsoft wise.
Yeah, they have. They've struggled, and I think that's always been, as PlayStation fans ourselves, that was always the pull, the allure. It was the AAA first party titles, and like you cannot deny it. Like PlayStation have just absolutely they nailed it the PS4 generation with a mixture of old IP and new IP, and that seems to have continued. Like you look at it with this year, and they came out the gate with Horizon at the start of the year. Then they topped it up with The Last of Us remake in the middle, and then they round it out with what seems to be Game of the Year worthy God of War Ragnarok. And that's like kind of almost like every third of the year we've had a big tentpole game to go, wow, look at this. And that's not even including the second party deals they make with like Square Enix for all the Final Fantasies and such. And Xbox is kind of unfortunately, if as many studios as they have, Phil and the wider team of the kind of, obviously COVID and stuff internally as well, but they have been let down a little bit by their timelines and release schedule. I think it was a big hit earlier this year when Starfield and Redfall both got pushed back, because that would have been your tent poles for the autumn and then the winter, and it's like, okay.
I think we have to remember as well, Microsoft now have a lot of game studios, but 4 or 5 years ago they didn't really. They've bought a lot of studios. Like it was Microsoft that kick-started this whole like condensation of the condensing of like the gaming industry, where everyone's buying everyone. That I think happened because like Microsoft started. Well, was it the Bethesda deal that suddenly spooked everyone? So I was like, grab whoever's still on the table
before like Microsoft a fire sale all of a sudden.
Yeah,
but again, yeah, they've been unfortunate, because I think Stalker 2 was supposed to be out this year, and because of the whole Ukraine invasion thing, which obviously couldn't have been helped, like that got delayed indefinitely, and it's just been a quiet year, and I think that's why we've seen Game Pass's numbers maybe not see as much growth, because you've got to remember last year they had this massive boom, but they also had Halo Infinite and Forza launch at the back end of last year, which are two of their big tentpole titles. And then, yeah, it's been a bit quiet, and putting release dates on things seems to be a bit on the short front. And at the end of the day, regardless of price and tech and specs and marketing and Game Pass, if all your mates out there are going, oh, Spider-Man comes out on PS5 next year, Spider-Man 2, then Wolverine's coming out, and it's just the marketing optics of it, where people go like, all right, it might be more expensive over on the PlayStation side, but that's what I want to play. So there's work to be done, I think, in just getting these out the door. And I think next year they are stacked to have a much stronger year on the exclusive front.
Yeah, I kind of think they've already laid the groundwork to fix this problem.
Yeah.
It's just a case of waiting out, which is actually why I considered buying an Xbox. Even before we decided to launch an Xbox podcast, I had my eye on one. Just because before I've always said I need when I've made the decision, I've always went PlayStation for the first party titles, and Microsoft's first party lineup just didn't quite do it for me. It just didn't appeal to me as much.
I mean, realistically, if you don't like kind of get into the Gears of War series, like the past kind of 2 to 3 years has been stark, right? I mean, I'd argue like the last kind of big significant Xbox exclusive was probably like Gears 5.
Halo. That Halo came out this year.
Yeah, even then that's getting dragged through the mud by people now.
Yeah.
Like hardcore fans are not best pleased with Halo Infinite. Like I think it's finally getting ray tracing in this next update, and it's like, why was that at launch? Like the Series X can do ray tracing.
Yeah.
Do you feel Microsoft put Halo out this year because of how barren the air was looking in terms of first party titles? Was it last year?
Last Christmas, yeah. It was almost a year today.
It might have been one of them. So looking at what was potentially getting delayed, look at the status of a handful of projects and going, if we don't put something out, we're going to have nothing.
Well, remember, Halo Infinite was supposed to be Series X and S launch, and it got delayed, and then it got delayed again, and then it was like, all right, we need to get this out this Christmas because it's been so long, and then it came out. I think they launched the campaign early. That came out early doors, which was great. People were hyped about it, and then multiplayer. Everyone loves multiplayer Halo, and then I just think it's people have been very underwhelmed by it, and this is coming from like the hardcore Halo fan base. Like I've seen on Xbox podcast, people literally go to town on this game and say like, "Are 343 the right studio to be doing it?" And if that's your big, like that's akin to what Uncharted coming out the door and failing, I guess, for Sony, like to try and put on like their biggest game, The Last of Us 2 maybe coming out and being terrible mess, but it wasn't. It was polished perfection. Albeit some people didn't like the story, but the game was phenomenal. Yeah,
for someone who's like still kind of an outsider to the Xbox ecosystem, I felt like Halo was at its peak during the 360 era. Over the Xbox One era, it just kind of seemed like a bit tarnished, and like, you know how God of War was before 2018. In that kind of same, maybe the game's a bit dated, maybe it needs that kind of semi-reinvention.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think a lot of the IP, unfortunately, in the 360 era, as good as that was, the audience have grew up since then. Mm-hmm. And everyone who had like a wild, crazy time with the likes of like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and Gears and Halo, terrific, but they're now all in their 30s like we are. And I don't want, like, I get a bit senseless just playing a shooter. Yeah. Especially and that's like, not that they are just shooters, like that's obviously boiling them down to their bare basics, but you know what I mean. I feel like I want more from my games nowadays, and that's why I probably lean more towards story-based things. And I think a lot of the Xbox audience are expecting that big hitter, and I think they have a lot of titles lined up that will tick those boxes. Like the next Hellblade game looks phenomenal, and I think that will be one of their kind of leaning in that direction, spreading their portfolio a little bit. But
they own Obsidian as well. Like story-based and Obsidian go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So they have, like you said, they've done the groundwork over the last half a decade. It's just now, hopefully next year, we'll see the start of those fruits kind of coming from the tree. Because remember, they got a bit of a sucker punch with the Bethesda acquisition, that the first 2 games they put out since owning Bethesda were exclusive on PlayStation in Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo. So it's like, you bought them, great, we've got these phenomenal studios, and the next 2 returns on your investment are solely like PlayStation.
Must sting a bit, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. But then in long term, Deathloop's now on Game Pass, and then there's a story later on in this show where we talk about Ghostwire Tokyo. So it's like, it will pay dividends, I think, eventually. It's again, it's time, and I think people's patience has been drawn out with the Xbox One and the start of this generation, and Game Pass has done a lot to kind of soften that blow a little bit. But next year, if like next year Starfield gets delayed again and Redfall maybe doesn't hit, there will be more people asking questions, I think of leadership and such.
But it doesn't matter because you're already hooked in for 2 years on Game Pass.
Well, exactly, yeah.
I don't think Microsoft bought Bethesda with an eye on Starfield, to be honest. I think they have an eye on Elder Scrolls 6 more than Starfield. Because remember how huge Skyrim was and still continues to be.
Yeah,
that's why. Yeah, that's why. Like, because everyone will remember that when Elder Scrolls 6 launches, that's going to sell. It's just going to sell absolutely tons because everyone will remember how much they loved Skyrim, and will just flock to that game. And every single copy of that game, regardless where you buy it, Microsoft are taking a cut of. That's why they bought Bethesda. But
yeah, it's all long-term profit to reinvest in a Game Pass, isn't it?
Yeah, but let's move on to something different. Actually, let's go to Ghostwire Tokyo, since we've already brought it up. Ghostwire Tokyo is jumping to Xbox as soon as the exclusivity ends, when I can use words, apparently March next year.
Yeah, it's no surprise. We saw it with Deathloop, as we mentioned, and you own the studio, so once that kind of contract deal with Sony's up, bring it over. Well-reviewed game. Not one that really caught my eye. I think there's something about the first person, as I mentioned before, the first person nature of it. It kind of has to do something special to get me in the door with it, and I think is it Arcane who did Ghostwire Tokyo?
I believe so, yeah.
So if it's similar to kind of like Dishonored and stuff. There's just something about in Prey. There's just something about it. I don't know whether it's visually. They just don't appeal to me. I think Ghostwire Tokyo did a little bit more with the color palette, but once I saw a bit of gameplay, it just kind of like looked the same.
Yeah, I think that's just the nature of first-person gaming. Like, it seems to be very much not your like natural where you're not naturally drawn towards. And
I absolutely loved Wolfenstein, which is weird. But then to correct myself as well, it was Tango Gameworks, this one. It wasn't Arcane did Deathloop. That's where I was getting my wires crossed, my ghost wires crossed. I would say.
You say you love Wolfenstein, but I think Wolfenstein is a bit more of a smaller experience. So it's very linear, it's very chapter-based, and it's just like, he's probably about 15 to 20 hours of just chaos.
Maybe I just love killing Nazis. That's what
Maybe
it is.
Maybe that. Well, it's similar. It's kind of
killing business.
Yeah. It does. I think stuff like Doom and Wolfenstein, they don't try to be anything that they're not. They just go, you know what? This is just largely a chaos generating Nazi killing game. Have fun and then move on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. it's not trying to be like a complex, deep RPG of any sort of description.
Yeah,
but
was reviewed well. I think as well, Tango Gameworks, I think they're the only one of Microsoft Studios to actually be based in Japan, which I think could be interesting going forward with them. I'd imagine once now Ghostwire's out the door, I'd like to see them work on something new that maybe wasn't first person, because I think because the one thing Xbox do have with their catalogue of IP they've acquired or bought is they've got so much first person. Like, if you think, if the Call of Duty deal goes through and they've got the Bethesda stuff, it's almost like too much first person, and that's when I think it starts to look the same, when it's just two hands doing assorted things with just a gun and things like, I want to see more of those worlds and those characters. And it's like, again, third person's my favourite, so I am biased towards it, but you know what I mean? Like, I feel like looking at Arcane, looking at Tango, looking at all the Activision studios they've got for Call of Duty, and then all the Bethesda teams on top of that, and what they do themselves with between Halo, and it's like, just mix it up a little bit. Like, let these studios do something new.
I feel like a lot of franchises, like, and properties will kind of just go into hiatus once they've once they actually like take a step back and look and say, holy shit, we have a lot of kind of flavors, like different flavors of this kind of dish.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, if you're at Tango and you're like high up in Microsoft and they go, right, our new idea for a game is it's this first person shooter. I'll just stop you there. Yeah. I've literally got 7 other studios knocking on my door saying, Phil, we've got an idea for a first person shooter. Yeah. And it's like, as they start to come out on Game Pass, say 2-3 years down the line, you know what I mean? At what point does like the 2026 lineup for Game Pass look like? Shooter. And it starts to get a bit samey.
It's similar to the complaints about Ubisoft, where all Ubisoft games feel very similar, very samey, and then over time it kind of just like they'll become less appealing a bit. But I think Microsoft has still got a bit like in the Xbox 360 bro gamer era, where everything was shoot. That's where things like Halo did well. It's where things like Gears did well, stuff of that nature. And it's that diversity they get. I think they're very much on the route, but yeah, seeing other studios like go away from first person or go like linear third person, or it's a Japanese studio, go distinctly Japanese, go get some more like Japanese style RPGs, because that's one area I think Xbox is severely lacking.
Yeah, they're doing good though. I think Persona's done phenomenal on Game Pass from what I've seen.
Well, so this is an example of Microsoft doing what I want them to do, is like, yes, go get things like Persona. Bring it to the platform, because that did really well. They've done that, but now you also want to get some more first party. You want a first party Persona.
Yeah, it's nice to see them working on a more like international, because they kind of went quite insular last generation, where everything was just like I said, westernized, and they were really missing big chunks of the industry. And I think that's where Sony thrived a little bit, because even though they're very much Western based and the headquarters is in America now, they still have those ties to the Eastern audience, and like Japan especially. There's so many studios over there that do quality stuff, and it does give a bit of diversity. And I think as gamers evolve and change, and people kind of figure out their own tastes in life and what they want out of gaming, you need that variety to keep people on board. Otherwise, they will jump or they will look elsewhere. So do it.
I mean, variety is the spice of life, after all.
The spice wars of life. Yeah.
But moving on, next topic, I don't want to dwell too much on, because we are going to talk a bit more about and talking the PS, but Kojima's his new game may have just been leaked.
I try to set you up there for a perfect transition to the Spice Wars thing. The Spice Wars of life. But Kojima.
But you know why? It's like last week in my intro, I named the topic, then we didn't even touch on it throughout the show, so sorry for everyone for that. This week, I'm determined not to make that mistake again. And I mentioned Kojima in the intro, so we're talking about Kojima, damn it.
So what about Kojima?
So, new game. Apparently it's been leaked, called Overdose. Again, just first impressions. We'll talk a bit more and talk on the PS.
Will we? I might just skip it.
Well, that's your show now, so it's your fault.
Yeah, I mean, what do we know of it so far? Because like Overdose isn't even the official name; it's just the rumored leak name.
Project Overdose.
Project Overdose.
The thing I do know is this is the most like Hideo, like Kojima way to kind of like to leak a title ever. Like there's like for people who haven't seen like the video, it's like a clip of the actual game, and then the actual person recording it is just like laid on his bed, like half naked, and you can see him in the reflection of him like filming it on his phone. It's just it's such a bizarre, like, strange thing to see. It's like,
imagine if that's when the game actually is fully revealed. That's what it is. Camera. It's like you play as the guy in his underpants, and actually all the footage on screen was just within the game, like Inception style. In terms of the actual game itself, in the leaked footage, all we really saw was it was kind of a female protagonist. Looked like an empty office building or something, and there was just rubbish everywhere. The building falling apart. She was getting scared by just like every little noise and kind of shadow that was going past. She goes down a corridor. It did say at the top, I think it said like camera number 1 almost. So it looked like, even though you were playing as the woman, she was supposed to be through some kind of CCTV monitoring. And then she kind of goes to the end of the corridor. There's another bang, and she hides behind a kind of countertop. And then she kind of covers her face, and she gets attacked by whatever this creature is. And then, like you said, Rob, it just cuts to the video ends, and there's just this reflection of a dude in his underpants recording on a phone. And I presume this is how he's getting away with the leak. By there'll be no timestamp or metadata within the video file to track it back to him, because it like. All the official development toolkits obviously got watermarks and stuff, so they can track whoever leaks this stuff for testers and such. A guy in his underpants recording this it looks like a private YouTube video that he's recording it on a different device. But yeah, it is the most Kojima thing ever, and I would love it if it can. It's definitely going to be an Easter egg in the game, I feel, at some point, a dude in his underpants, and you're going to have to kill him or something. It's going to be Kojima's way of saying, like, yeah, fuck you, leaker. Like, we're going to kill you in-game.
I can just imagine him lining up every single person in his studio and, like, getting them to, like, take a shot and, like, inspecting the nipples and being like, no.
He just walks into his office, right, everyone in your underwear, and just going through, just like, no, not you.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a typical day. Like,
just everyone's lined up, and Kojima's just going down the line, just examining everyone's nipples.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd laugh if it ended up being like Norman Reedus or something. He's like, I didn't know, boss. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm sorry.
But do you think this?
I'm getting stressed because Walking Dead's ending, and
I need something else to do.
Yeah. Do you think this could be the game Kojima's announced to work with Xbox on?
I don't, because I think it's too soon for that. I think the Microsoft deal was only announced earlier this year that he was working on it, and he said it was cloud gaming. Like, he said it was going to be powered by cloud or something. This seems very horror linear, akin to PT or Resident Evil. So I think it's too soon, and I don't think from what we've seen in this leak is that it's anything to really merit cloud gaming or the power of servers and such.
But you say it's too soon, but I would counter with, like, Kojima likes to have, like, be in the news a lot. So even when his game's years out, he's like announcing the games, and he's turning up to everything. Like, how many years was Death Stranding getting like marketed for? Like, it seems like every single major gaming event, Death Stranding was there for about 3 years. Like, to the point where by the time the game came out, I still didn't have a clue what the game was about. I mean, what is a Strand game anyway? And I was just so sick of hearing it, I just lost any sort of interest in the game.
Yeah, I mean, it was only June that he announced the Xbox partnership, so I feel like the game looked, even though it was recorded through a screen, it looked quite polished. And I don't think you would have a game that you're only really officially signed off this summer would be that close to looking something short of playable. However, if Overdose is kind of this little interstitial jump between we don't really know how much his studio's sized up either since Death Stranding. Like, has he took on board another 100 employees? Has he expanded? But more importantly, I think he's just lined up for the Game Awards to announce this officially. Like, this leak's too timely with the Game Awards less than a month away. It's like,
honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, Jeff Keighley had some hand in this leak, because, like, if we do a bit of a leak, people will get excited about a Kojima game. Everyone knows me and you are bros, so we'll just, like, everyone will, like, tune in the Game Awards expecting a Kojima game there.
What we do know it's not is that abandoned game, though. If you remember the one that was announced, and then it was supposed to be, they were trying to play on the Silent Hill stories that like, oh, it's another Silent Hill game. It's in partnership with Kojima. And everyone thought this guy was Hideo Kojima because his name translated in Japanese to Hideo or something like that. And it was going to have, I think I had like a exclusive tech demo through the PlayStation Store, and then it got pulled. And this guy seemingly has gone into hiding. And I think on this week's podcast, I think is it Brain Structure, Kojima's podcast, he was saying like this guy is just been a nuisance to him now, and he still gets tweets every single day of people sending him like his face deep faked onto this guy from the abandoned studio, and he's just like he's fed up with it now. But I think we can safely say Kojima is not attached to the abandoned project, which seemingly has been abandoned, ironically enough now, because we've heard nothing about it, thankfully, for months.
Hideo Kojima is not the most like traditional guy in terms of marketing. Maybe this is a massive marketing ploy. He's got the internet creating memes. Not. He's intentionally created a scenario where he knew the internet would take it up and create a meme. He's like, it's not me, guys. It's not me, guys. And then he walks up the game and was, it's me, guys.
I hope not.
I could see them doing that though. I mean, one thing we definitely can see him doing is selling to either Microsoft or Sony because he wants to remain independent as long as he's alive.
I mean, that's just like an invitation from one of the major studios to like,
give it a go.
Yeah, just
yeah, let them make all these games just as long as the leadership's not there.
Yeah,
but you'd
argue
I
think
though,
it kind of suits it, right? Like, more and more you see that his titles. But bear in mind, like, we grew up like Metal Gear Solid, which was always like a massive game every single time it came out. And the games that he's creating now, whilst they do have mass appeal, I'd argue because of his name, like, I think it gives him a bit of freedom to stay independent and make things that potentially don't have mass appeal. Like Death Stranding I had no interest in that game, and that's completely fine. He made that for himself. Yeah, and that's completely fine, but he wouldn't be able to make those types of titles if he was kind of under a bigger banner, I don't think. Yeah,
I think the experience at Konami probably kind of soured him. Like, where he's clearly this incredibly creative guy. He wants to push the boat out, do stuff that is not really done in video games. He wants to do new stuff. He doesn't want to just create the same game over and over again. And now he's got himself to a position where he can do basically whatever hell he likes. He is the top dog at his company.
Yeah.
So
and he had no outside funding as well. It was all his money, so he's not even got like investors to kind of to go to. I don't think at this point.
I think he'll have got a good bit of cash injection from Sony for that Death Stranding. Like, could you imagine? Like, as soon as he goes independent, they go, "Can we have an exclusive game deal with you, Hideo, because of like our amazing history with Metal Gear and everything?" And the way they announced him on stage was so like pomp and circumstance around it. And then he must have got a good couple of million for that to help him. And then they gave him the Decima engine that made Horizon. So he got like a free in-game gorgeous engine to make Death Stranding. So that must have helped him elevate so quickly. Oh, yeah. In the kind of grander scheme of things, I think you're both completely right in saying, like, why would he want to work under the umbrella of someone else when he's doing perfectly fine on his own? Mm-hmm. Realistically, the guy's 59. Like, he could go for maybe another, 2 games, maybe a 10-year development cycle, 8 to 10 year. And then when you're pushing 70, you've got to imagine he'd probably just sell. Like, he'll retire. And like he's saying as long as he lives. But then I guess that also comes when it comes down to business. Like, once he's no longer in charge of the studio, unless he plans on just running it until on his deathbed or something, like which I can't imagine.
I generally could see him doing that
in a decade.
I could see him just keep going until... It just seems to be like creative, like industries seems to be just a passion for him. Not just gaming, but he clearly wants to get involved in movies and stuff. So I could see it being a case of this is not really a job as such. This is what he wants to do with his life. So I think if he could be 80 years old, I think he'll still be involved in games. He's not sat there coding, but he's kind of like throwing out his whatever crazy stuff is coming out of his head to his team, and they're the ones making the game.
Yeah. Obviously, we'll see, because all it takes in the games industry is like 1 or 2 big flops back to back. Like if this game Overdose is like poorly received or like averagely received, and then Death Stranding 2 is like, it's just more of the same. And then whatever this Xbox thing is like, it could turn pretty quick. And being independent, that is the risk of being independent in the games industry, is that if you don't make profit, or you'd like. We discussed it last week with like Gotham Knights and WB and Rocksteady and their leadership team leaving. Like, if Suicide Squad isn't top quality, then that's 2 games under their banner that could kind of put the studios into trouble and the staff into trouble. And being owned by a PlayStation or Microsoft at least gives you that security blanket of, well, we're part of the platform, so we're not going anywhere because they need us to make the games to fill out Game Pass or to fill out the first-party library.
What he needs to do is just keep getting games to sell, because at the moment, Kojima games sell, which means that Microsoft and Sony will jump over each other to get an exclusive title from Kojima. Yeah. But you know what also sells very well? Call of Duty. Cookies too.
I was going to say cookies, but...
Could go for a cookie now, actually. Now
yeah, me too, actually. Let us know if you want a cookie in the comments below. But we won't give you one, but just let us know anyway.
Data gathering. Yeah, we'll sell it to an advertiser.
The next thumbnail will have cookies in it.
Yeah. But Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2 has had the biggest opening weekend of the franchise.
Who'd have knew that the juggernaut that is Call of Duty keeps selling?
I'm actually a bit surprised, to be honest. Not that it's sold well, that it's broke the record.
Honestly, I can't go anywhere online without seeing clips of this fucking game, and like I don't.
You're watching one right now, via YouTube.
Yeah, like I've kind of moved away from like the COD franchise a long time ago, but Modern Warfare 2, the original, was probably my favorite of the series. I even worked the midnight release of that game when I worked in one of the old game station stores. But yeah, I could kind of see. I'm not surprised it kind of had the biggest opening weekend, because I feel like they've really just like put everything behind it, even more so than you would the other titles, because of, I guess, the legacy of the first game. I'd say. Yeah,
I don't know. Just in my mind, I think there's a lot of like gamers like ourselves who've just kind of burnt out on Call of Duty a long time ago. So it's one of them. I always expect them to do great numbers. It's the fact that it's selling more than it ever has. I thought the kind of peak of Call of Duty had already kind of peaked, and then kind of stabilised a bit. So it's not like declining year on year. But just apparently people really, really love shooting their friends in the face.
You know, earlier on when I said like killing Nazis, evidently humanity just likes killing full stop, whether it's in the virtual world or not. With this game, I think there could be something to be said about the time it's coming out. So this year there is no Battlefield, so there's no competition this year. It's again bringing back, as you said, Rob, arguably the biggest title again, we know obviously it's some kind of like reboot, rehash thing, but the fact that it's got Modern Warfare 2, which I think was a lot of people's, to this day's favourite Call of Duty of all time. So you've got that, the marketing they put behind it, similar to you, I've just been peppered with ads for this. And anywhere I look, there's a Call of Duty advert. And then I think something is also to be said about how many consoles are out there. We've just said about the success of the Series X and S last week. The PlayStation 5s report like 20 million. We know the PS4 is up to 140 million. PC seems to be flourishing bigger than ever before. Everyone after COVID seems to have like a little bit more of like a little dip of a toe into the gaming world who maybe wouldn't be gamers. And I think it's just almost like all the planets have just aligned for this to, no surprise, be the biggest seller. So I think it is a surprise, but at the same time there's a lot of things that kind of point towards why it's been so successful, and I think it just, no surprise, it's again shooter mechanics wise, it's undoubtedly the best hands-on feeling shooter out there. I think Titanfall does a lot. I think Apex has got some good stuff too, but when I play Call of Duty, like, it is just a solid first-person shooter, like through and through. It looks gorgeous to pick up as well. Yeah, absolutely.
It defined the genre. Like, I think Call of Duty and Doom are kind of like the biggest games to define the first-person shooter genre. Like Doom back in like the 90s, and like Call of Duty, like Modern Warfare, the first Modern Warfare, kind of reinvented the genre. And I think for me, the reason I kind of lost interest is I don't feel like the genre's moved forward since then. No,
they've took it in like pretty bad directions, like kind of going a bit more futuristic and
Kevin Spacey.
Definitely.
Outside the story stuff, it just feels mechanically like you can say it's an advantage that you can pick up a Call of Duty game and just play if you've ever played one. But it's also been like 20 years like of the same, really.
Yeah.
So that's like, yeah. Like
it is more just like a sport though now, even though it doesn't fit into the sport genre. It's kind of like if you were into shooters and that is like just your
it's
jam.
an e-sport.
Yeah, but in terms of like aside from the campaign, which we know is becoming like, I mean, the other, was it last year's version or was it the year before where they just ditched the campaign completely? Mm-hmm. It's clearly that people are there for the multiplayer, and when the multiplayer has no story attached to it, you're essentially just going there for the essentially the season content, which is why people play sports games and such. It's like sport doesn't really change year on year, but you go back for the new squad, the new rotation, the new kits, the new sponsorships, and it's more about just like that is your hobby. And I think Call of Duty for a lot of people, just like FIFA and just like Madden and such, just it's their hobby.
Yeah.
It's how they free themselves and just go click some heads and blow up some shit, and like that is gaming for them.
Yeah, they just
where it's way different.
I actually do still think like if you talk to a non-gamer about being a gamer, the first thing that comes to their mind is Call of Duty.
Absolutely.
And then when you say, I don't play Call of Duty, they just sometimes they are genuinely surprised and just don't.
Yeah.
But what do you play then? And then you have to start explaining. Well, I like to play more RPGs and story-based stuff, and they're just blank faced.
Yeah. And I do think that's, again, changing as gamers grow up and there's a different generation of like older gamers now. But you know what the testament to it all still is I guarantee you if I picked up Modern Warfare 2 today, I would have a hell of a time with it. I'd enjoy the campaign because it would 100%. Be polished, clean and fun. And I would go into multiplayer. I don't think I'd do terrible, but I know I wouldn't do as good as I did back on the OG Call it because my reflexes just are not there anymore. But I would definitely enjoy it. But just as an adult with other decisions to make is I can see my time better invested elsewhere. But at 800 million, it seems like a safe bet that the money Microsoft are supposedly going to pay for this acquisition, if it does go through, is you can see the long-term profit is still there to be made. Even though the billions of money to put down seems crazy, if after 3 days it's got $800 million, that's a pretty good return on investment. Albeit it might take a few years, you can see why the numbers tick green eventually.
Well, you can kind of see why on the on the Tech and Gaming podcast, Same Brain, that the ex-boss himself said that he'll ship Call of Duty to a PlayStation as long as the PlayStation is to ship to, because it's doing them numbers because it's everywhere.
This seems like an underhanded threat in lots of ways, where it's like, yeah, we'll give you Call of Duty as long as you're still around. And then it goes back away.
That's not how I read it, but okay. I actually just read this as a genuine, it makes more sense for us financially to keep putting this Call of Duty over on the PlayStation side of things, but in the future it'll be day and date on Game Pass when whatever settlement he agrees to, 5-10 years of no Game Pass is signed. Eventually, Call of Duty will be day and date in Game Pass, and then let's see how you last, Sony.
Yeah. It's very interesting to think he's coming out. So Phil Spencer's coming out now, and like I said, he's all the cards that were so close to his chest. He's just like, okay, I'm going to answer all these questions, and just nip them in the bud now, and I've got to imagine something's changed behind the scenes with all these legal rulings, because remember the deal when Jim Ryan came out from PlayStation, he said, look, I wasn't going to make these conversations public, but Phil wanted to make them public in whatever it was. I can't remember what it was now. It's been that much back and forth. But essentially, they were doing it all behind the scenes with lawyers and such, no doubt. And then Jim Ryan came out and said, look, he wanted to extend the deal for, I think, 3 years beyond Sony's current deal for Call of Duty. And he said that's not acceptable for PlayStation gamers. And Phil Spencer was like, well, that's actually more than most gaming deals actually run for, so it's quite generous. Now he's saying that it'll be on them as long as the platform and PlayStation exists to ship to. So I do feel like something's changed behind the scenes. They've hashed out some kind of deal where it's like, actually, okay, if he's going to come out now and publicly say, if there's a PlayStation, Call of Duty will be on it. It seems like they've settled out of court almost, kind of whatever it's. Well, obviously we probably won't know about it for some time, but it does seem like this deal will go through. And like you said, it just gives gamers that choice of play it on Game Pass for free or pay £70 on PlayStation. Profits there for Microsoft regardless.
Activision Blizzard, I think, is such a lucrative purchase for Microsoft. Bear in mind, this is Microsoft buying it, not Xbox. So you've got the Blizzard side of stuff. So you've got things like World of Warcraft in that. You've got Diablo and things. Overwatch.
Does anybody want to touch Blizzard at the moment? Jesus.
Yeah, but that's the same. Does anyone want to touch Activision? It's the same.
Fuck Bobby Kotick.
It's just, But Microsoft buying it gets rid of that problem entirely anyway. So this is so lucrative to Microsoft, like the kind of hybrid between console and PC sort of gaming that they have going on, that no matter if they have to put Call of Duty out there for Sony to just have as well, they could sign a 40-year deal that has to be day and date with Sony on PlayStation, can't go on Game Pass, and it's still probably going to be beneficial to Microsoft.
Oh, 100%. So
he'll be doing anything he can to make sure this deal goes through legally, because this is no longer really Microsoft and Sony arguing. This is like courts of laws in different countries and stuff looking into the deal to make sure it doesn't like breach any sort of like trading legislation.
Yeah.
So anything he can do to smooth it through. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think they expected to get the backlash legally that they did, so they've had to soften the position quite a bit.
Yeah. And
they've
to be honest,
very quiet on talking about anything outside of Call of Duty. Like, I'm sat here on the sidelines going like, well, what about Crash Bandicoot? I want to play that on PlayStation. Like, it's a PlayStation market. What about Spyro? And it's just like, it's all Call of Duty, Call of Duty, Call of Duty. It's like,
because talking Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Because there isn't a competitor to Call of Duty. That's the argument.
Bandicoot. He's the king.
There's Spyro.
No,
and there's Mario and there's Sonic there. There's like,
we've had this discussion, Richie.
Yeah, I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying there's other platformers, but in terms of the numbers that Call of Duty do, there's nothing comes close.
Yeah, true. I mean, just it's that more. Yeah. It's like the collateral. If this deal goes through, like we also risk losing all these other games as well, as a like PlayStation, Nintendo fan as well.
Yeah, but I mean, to be honest, as a general just advocate for gamers, I think Microsoft softening their position to make sure Call of Duty stays everywhere it's great.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
I mean, looking at this ecosystem, like quite frankly, I think Microsoft are in the long game of, you know what, we'll publish games wherever. We'll put Ori and the Will of the Wisps on Nintendo. We'll put Minecraft on everything. You can have Call of Duty, because at the end of the day, they make £70 here, £70 there. And if people are still investing in Game Pass, then they've essentially got revenue from 3 different platforms and PC on top of it. It just feeds the machine that is Microsoft, and that's why they're so cash rich compared to Sony, because they have businesses elsewhere.
Yeah. Moving on now to something a bit different. One of the senior writers of Horizon Forbidden West is joining the Fable reboot team. So Fable, the reboot's been in the works. I'm sure it's been in the works for a long time.
It has, yeah.
And I think only recently we started hearing about them actually not hiring people for it, which is kind of bizarre.
Which means it's even further out, yeah.
Yeah.
It's similar to kind of what was happening with the Metro trilogy over on Nintendo, where like it was announced, and then at some point they came and just said, "Oh yeah, we've started from scratch again," and you're like, "Oh no, don't do that." And I think Fable's one of them things that's just destined to like not come out until like 2030.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Yeah, it's like this news is good, but it's surrounded by the fact that this game really hasn't started in any significant way yet.
Well, that's it. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a game developer. I would have thought if a game's story-based, one of the first things you kind of got to get nailed down is the story before you can really start working on anything else.
Yeah, I mean, when was this announced? Was it, 2-3 years ago, maybe?
It was at one of the press conferences, because it was kind of got loads of hype when it came out, but then, again, this is kind of feeds into our original first story of the week about the exclusives being kind of just like so far out. People are finding it hard to buy into the ecosystem when they're like, well, the games I want to play is so far away. I'll just wait until see how it pans out, kind of thing.
Yeah. It kind of feels like the person in charge of this like project.
2020, Rob.
2020, yeah. So
back in
like
2020.
Jesus.
But
like the person who's like in charge of this project was like looking through his desk and like just found like a little to-do note saying hire
staff.
For Fable. He's like, shit. He's just ran out and got one.
Right, so in 2020, I found a Windows Central article that says, and this is from July 2020, that's basically, it was kind of announced.
2.5
But it was already rumoured for years before then.
Mm.
So it's probably been getting rumoured for 5+ years, and now they're starting to hire people.
You know, again, being new to the Xbox ecosystem, Fable's one of them games, with the article in front of me now, I can't picture what this game looks like at all. Like, in my mind, I don't know if it's a top-down thing, it's a first-person, it's a third-person action
game.
Yeah,
but in my mind, like, it's so weird. Like, I'm so ingrained in the industry, and I have no, like, in my mind's eye, there is no visual picture of what this game looks like. I'm guessing fairies of some sort are in there. and that's it. I can't like if you say any other franchise to me, even if I've never played it, I've got that kind of just like visual memory of like a trailer or some cover art or the box art. For Fable, I have nothing.
It's kind of like a fantasy, but it's like Fable 3, for when it came out, suffered in like a quite like muted, samey colour palette, which kind of like, don't get me wrong, like the Fable franchise like well received, but it definitely shows its age, and it's very kind of, for me, like forgettable now compared to some of the other things I've kind of moved on since the last release. So I'm not really surprised, to be honest.
Needs a reboot.
Yeah. I'm glad there is a reboot coming because it's a franchise I've always heard about, but I've never played. So a reboot is like a perfect opportunity for me to jump into it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it suffered from that kind of like greeny, browny, sepia kind of vibe of a lot of games back then. So for someone who wasn't kind of into the franchise, it will have just blended into everything else that was happening.
Yeah. Moving on, we've got some new games coming to Game Pass this month. I'm just going to go through them quickly because we're already getting on for time. Let me know if there's anything you're interested in. The Legend of Tyanding is coming November the 1st, so it's already out. Ghost Song's coming November 3rd, again, already out. Return to Monkey Island comes out on November the 8th. God of War's the day after, so... Football Manager 2023 comes out November the 8th. Vampire Survivors comes out November the 10th. Flight Simulator 40th Anniversary comes out November the 11th. Pentiment comes out November the 15th. Somerville, November the 15th. And Gungrave Gore, November the 22nd.
Yeah,
feels like you're reading football fixtures out, Richie.
What? Sorry?
Feels like you're reading football fixtures out.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pentiment
is, yeah.
That I think is the big one for Microsoft this year. For this month, sorry. That's the big one. Will you be checking out Football Manager, Richie? I know you're the only one of the three of us who's probably played it extensively in the past.
I might do, but the problem with Football Manager is like similar to Civ in some certain ways where you just get absolutely sucked into. You just go, just one more day. And next thing you know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning and you've just been watching. It's basically at times a spreadsheet simulator.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's like, I could have been working on real spreadsheets in this time.
The thing is, I actually already have it downloaded.
Okay. So
because
it is going to happen.
I'm going to jump into it at some point. I've downloaded it through Game Pass because it's coming to Game Pass, so I might as well jump into it and have a play. But I'm going to try not to get sucked into it.
Okay. Have you got any interest in Pentiment then? Because it's Obsidian. You mentioned Story. It's a smaller game. So again, one of their spin-off teams, similar to Grounded.
It's coming at an unfortunate time for me.
Where you'll be knee-deep in God of War, basically.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, on November the 15th, I dare say I'm only just scratching the surface of God of War Ragnarok.
I'll have the platinum by then. Call it now.
In 6 days, you'll have the platinum for God of War Ragnarok.
All right, maybe not, but I feel like I could do it, depending on how much cleanup there is for collectibles and stuff.
If I had 6 days where I didn't have to do anything else, I think it's doable. Probably. I don't know how big the game is, but I'm assuming similar.
I think it's like 40-odd hours people have said so far.
Yeah, so I think it's doable in 6 days, but unfortunately I do have a job. I have to go to work.
Yeah, those damn jobs getting in the way.
I have to sleep. So it's like, I'll be scratching the surface. So Pentiment might be on my radar for later in the year, maybe next year. It might be the game actually after when I finish God of War that I play to finish out the year. You mentioned having something over Christmas.
Mm-hmm. So you're already making plans not to play a Plague Tale. I mean, within the hour period of a show, you've gone from that sounds like I could squeeze them in.
I said in this show that it's unlikely I'm going to play Plague Tale anytime soon because they'd have to go out and buy the first one.
If you'd have claimed it on PlayStation Plus, like you should have done, you should have it.
I don't know why I didn't. I usually do.
Every month, boys and girls, claim your free games, whether you intend to play them or not.
That's true. But that's all we have time for this week. If you've liked the video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel or your podcast feed of choice with notifications switched on. Let us know in the comments what game you are most looking forward to for the rest of the year on Xbox or in our Discord server. The link is in the description below. Thank you very much for watching or listening. My name's been Richie.
Mine has been Chris.
And I've been Rob.
We'll see you in the clouds. Goodbye.